Okay, so because I'm trying to increase my total step count and also put out content around skincare, I figured I could do both at the same time. So today I wanted to talk about something that I think comes up pretty frequently, both in casual conversation as well as with clients, as well as the people I have conversations with online. And that is, can you clear your acne with facial? So I think there's a couple layers to this. But first and foremost, why am I even talking about skincare? My name is Connor. I'm a licensed esthetician in the state of Florida. I'm also the director of a local med spa. We offer facials, we offer advanced services, injectables, lasers, etc. And so on this channel, I just like to talk about, the science behind skincare, skincare products, skincare procedures, and then, like even just the day-to-day stuff, like how do we, maximize things like our morning and evening routines. If we're trying to address something specific, how do we do that? So that's the kind of stuff that I like to talk about here. If that's of interest, please do subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next one. To get back onto the subject of facials and their relationship to acne, I have a video which I'll link that I basically took as an opportunity to outline, like how do I feel about facials as, a service? Do I think that they have value? Do I think that there's something that you should be paying for? Is this something that I think that the average person should be doing on a regular basis? Basically, the takeaway from that video is that, in my opinion, the value of a facial is very much dependent upon the individual. And by that, I mean the individual practitioner, but also the individual receiving the facial and the relationship between those two. So I don't really think that there's a ton of value in going in for, a monthly facial service every 4 to 6 weeks, for example, if you're not having any kind of clinical treatment incorporated as part of that service. Now, there are a lot of different kinds of things that can happen in a facial. A facial is not one thing. That being said, for the purposes of this conversation, a facial really is just like a standard, maybe minimal exfoliation, like a light scrub, like physical scrub. For example, maybe a hydrating mask, some moisturizing or antioxidant serums applied, and then, you're more or less finished. This is the kind of service that people will sometimes opt for because they just want a relaxing experience, not necessarily because they're trying to change their skin. And, if that's what you're trying to do, then that's fantastic. But for this video, we're talking about, relying on facials to address an actual concern. So in this case, acne. Now, why do I say that facials are not really doing very much? Well, it's because the skin will respond to consistency above all else. And so what is inherently inconsistent, if we're talking about something like skincare, which is a day-to-day thing, is a service that only happens once every 4 to 6 weeks. That is not consistent insofar as the skin is concerned. That is very inconsistent, frankly. Now, the appointment and the cadence of those visits, that could be very consistent. But when we're talking about consistency in skincare, we really do mean on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. So what I think has to happen in order for a, monthly, well, just to keep it simple, we'll just stick with monthly. In order to make a monthly facial worth it, you need to be able to have a conversation with your esthetician. You need to be able to have them, assess your routine, assess your concerns, in this case, acne, and make effective recommendations accordingly. Now, not every facialist is going to be able to do that. Some are very, very skilled at providing the service that is a facial. That is not the same as being able to effectively build home care routines. Now, that's not to say that one is necessarily better than the other. They're just different roles, in my view, at least. I've spoken with estheticians that I'm sure give fantastic facials, but that, when you dive into the details, they're not really able to prescribe a comprehensive routine or make really detailed, nuanced, and tailored recommendations for home care, or for particular skin condition management. Now, if we're talking about acne, that is obviously something that requires an ongoing treatment approach. That is not going to be satisfied by a monthly service. Now, if you're going in for a monthly chemical peel, for example, and by chemical peel, I mean that very broadly. I think that people sometimes hear chemical peel and they think, okay, so this person's going to be peeling in sheets of skin and, it's just going to be this really dramatic thing. That doesn't have to be the case. There are very mild chemical peels that don't even necessarily cause any kind of true peeling, so to speak. But those can be beneficial for a deeper pore cleansing, a deeper exfoliation than you can achieve with your standard home care. That kind of service on a routine basis, I think, would be beneficial for somebody that has acne because you can combine that with a lot of these other treatments. Now, that being said, exactly how appropriate that would be is going to vary based on your particular acne care regimen. Because myself, for example, I am using strong retinoids on a nightly basis, prescription strength products, and then every morning I'm using azelaic acid, which is technically an exfoliant, a very gentle one, but nevertheless an exfoliant. So for me, a monthly chemical peel, so to speak, I don't know that that really makes a ton of sense because while I could do, because I'm an esthetician myself, I have access to these products, I can be a bit more aggressive and I can bend the rules, so to speak. So I can do, a mild chemical peel on my face once a month, for example, and that not really be a problem. But if you're the average person going into the average esthetician, they are going to want to ensure that they minimize risk wherever possible. And one of the ways that they're going to do that is by telling you to discontinue certain products before receiving certain treatments. So even in that case, it's not necessarily the best approach because you have this constant start and stop, because you have to go off of these medications. For example, in the case of retinoids, you would probably be told by many estheticians to discontinue 5 to 7 days prior to receiving your peel. And then you wouldn't be told to resume until probably about 5 to 7 days post-peel. And of course, all of that varies person to person, from one peel to the next. The brands that create these things, they'll all have their own, recommendations. So I say that as a very high level estimate. Now, what would that mean? If I was going off of my retinoid for 5 to 7 days prior to my peel and wasn't resuming my retinoid for another 5 to 7 days after my peel, that means that basically for half the month and half the year, I am not using my acne medication. What does that mean? I'm probably going to have inconsistent control over my acne. And that is something that I think that people miss because I think that some people, which I've spoken about in this previous video, have an almost mystical view as to what a facial can offer. A facial can be a really relaxing and enjoyable experience. It can, on some level, it can actually just be a moment to spend with the esthetician because, over the course of months and in some cases years, you develop relationships with these people, and so it's not just about what are you able to do for me while I'm on the table. It's also, I want to spend time with you because we have a relationship and this is the occasion during which we're able to, engage with each other. But I've gotten off track. We were talking about facials, not peels. I kind of just wanted to clarify that peels can be a part of your routine. Peels can be a way that you move the needle toward clear skin. But if we're talking about standard facials, which is, again, what I'm referring to when I say facial in the context of can you rely on facials to clear acne, you're really not doing much that's very active in the skin when you are receiving a traditional facial service. And that is not necessarily a bad thing, but what it does mean is that it can't be the thing that you rely on in order to solve the problem. It can be a nice adjunct because, again, you're able to utilize the opportunity to connect with a professional, to make adjustments to your routine as needed. Things that could very much be, related to your success or failure with respect to your acne management. And so having a conversation with them on a monthly basis or bi-monthly basis, that's a really, really great thing to do. But again, it's on you and on the esthetician to make that happen. If the esthetician knows that you have these concerns and then you're coming in and your skin's still not very clear, they can make recommendations accordingly. Basically, if we talk about acne, we have to talk about the underlying process. And the underlying process is one that spans weeks. The pimples, the pustules, things that you see on the surface of your skin are not things that happened overnight in most cases, right? This is an ongoing process. It's the product of a skin that is being pressured by a variety of factors in most cases to produce new acne lesions. And so what we would need to do is interrupt that process, interrupt that cycle of new and worsening breakouts. And that's something that you're really, in a perfect world, addressing on a daily basis. And like I, for example, address that on a daily basis utilizing a nightly retinoid. And in the morning, I use an azelaic acid product. So I am basically interrupting the tendency of my skin toward new or worsening breakouts twice a day. And that is something that I've arrived at for a number of reasons. There are benefits to, for example, azelaic acid and retinoids that extend beyond acne management. So I want them in my routine, whether I'm struggling with acne or not. Thank you for watching. If this was at all interesting or useful, do like and subscribe so that you don't miss the next one. I really do want to talk about, the things that we can do with skincare specifically. I definitely want to talk about in-clinic procedures, talk about products, etc. But I don't want to overemphasize the things that you have to go to someone in order to do. I do believe that home care is in and of itself transformative. That is what I am most interested in exploring here. So until next time, I'll see you in the next one.